Hi everyone. So here we are again. We're in May now and this is block 4. So just to show you briefly, I've got my ScanNCut SDX fabric mat and I've got my 3 fabrics that we're going to be using for the last block. I'm going to flip you over to the machine, call the block up and explain which elements I'm going to be cutting from which fabric. So I'm going to come into patterns, I'm going to scroll down and find the quilt blocks, and the quilt block that I need is in this section here, the second one along on my machine, and it's block number 25. So I'm going to scroll down until I find it. So here it is. It's a slight variation of the block that we did last month. So it's block 25. For me, I'm going to cut the corner squares in white, and I think I'm going to be doing these little green half square triangles in white as well. Then the rectangles I'm going to cut in probably my yellow spotty fabric, and the square in the middle I'm thinking of doing in the grey. So the first thing I'm going to do is make the size 10 inches because that's the size of the finished block that I want to make. So I'm going to say OK. I want to choose anything that's green on the mat. So I'm going to first of all select element A, which is the 4 corners, and I'm going to say OK. And it's telling me the size it's going to make them with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is already set in my machine, and it's telling me I need 4, so I'm going to say set. I'm going to go to add. I also want to add these little triangles here because I want to cut those in white as well. So I'm going to select those, which is element B, and it highlights on the screen to show you. And I'm going to say OK. Again, it's set the size already and I need 4. So that's put all the elements on the mat. So I'm going to load up my white fabric now onto my fabric mat, and I'm probably going to have to rearrange some of the shapes on the ScanNCut screen, but that's okay. So I'm just going to put my white piece of fabric onto this mat, and I'm just going to lay it down and smooth it out. So this all nicely fully stuck without any wrinkles. So you do, yours how you prefer. When I'm putting fabric on my mat, I like to start from the top and smooth down and then smooth out from the centre to the sides. And that generally gets away any air bubbles or, keeps your fabric nice and smooth. Now, if you're using a fabric that's got a right and a wrong side, you want the right side down on the mat with the wrong side facing, because if you're following along, we're going to be drawing the sew lines onto the fabric and you want them on the back. So let's go back to the machine. I'm going to load the machine into the mat. I'm going to take out my standard regular blade and I'm going to put in my air erasable fabric pen. Now you know that these are the fabric pens because they have this like strap of colour around the top. The purple one is air erasable, and there's a pale blue one like a turquoise colour, that's water erasable. So if you draw with that, that will disappear when you splash it with water. So I'm just going to put the lid of the pen in the top, drop the pen into my holder, and then drop this into the slot on the machine where the blade would normally go. Okay, so I'm just going to bring you back to the screen. So what I'm going to do now is do a background scan and press start. For anybody that's new, if this is the first video that you're finding, this is going to drag the mat through the machine, and it's going to give us a picture of what it sees. So it's going to show my piece of white fabric on this mat, which helps for perfect placement. Also, if this is the first video you're finding, This is block 4 of the quilt along. So there are 3 other videos here on my YouTube channel. If you go and look for the quilt along playlist, you will then find blocks 1, 2 and 3. I'm making 4 10-inch blocks, and then in the next video I'm going to show you how to quilt them, just very simple quilting, and then I'm going to be showing you how to assemble your blocks to make a 20-inch cushion that has a zip fastening. Okay, so now I can see the white piece of fabric on my mat. You're probably not going to be able to see it very well. I'm going to change the background to dark and see if it helps it show up any better. So I can see now that these are very close to the edge. So I'm going to move these and I'm going to rotate them. So I'm going to go to Edit, Object Edit, and rotate this one 180. And I'm just going to bring it roughly back, but just rotated. And then I'm going to do the same with this one. This will just help me be able to position them better when I come to move them in a few minutes. So if I just, you can hopefully see what I've done now. So I'm going to say OK. OK, I'm going to choose the 3 red boxes. I'm going to choose the box on the right hand side, which chooses everything that's on my mat. And then if I just select one and drag, I can move them all as a group, even though they're not grouped together. If I just select anywhere on the page, that deselects them. So now I can see that they're all positioned. They all look as though they're in the right place for this white piece of fabric. So now I'm going to say OK, OK, OK again, select, and I'm going to say draw and start. I've already got the pen loaded, so it's now going to draw me the lines that I will use for sewing along when I come to assemble this block. Okay, I'll just move you down because I know you didn't see any of that because I forgot to move the camera. But there are the drawn lines that the ScanNCut has just done for me. Okay, I'm just going to bring you back up to the screen now because I want to show you what you do next. So I'm going to take the pen out and just pop it on the top, and I'm going to put my fabric blade in. Now, what you need to do now is we need to cut. So you need to say finish, which I always think is a little bit confusing because to me, we've drawn and we want to cut. So to me, that would suggest we would go to the next part, but that's not the case. If you select next part, it will want you to load the next elements onto this mat. And we've not finished with this first set of elements yet. So we're going to say finish. That basically takes us back a page. So now from here, we can say select and we can say cut. And we're now going to cut out around all these shapes. And because the seam allowance is automatically on within the machine, and I have my seam allowance set to 1/4 of an inch, the ScanNCut will cut around these purple draw lines with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to press start. Okay, so that's finished. So let me just bring you back to the screen. So now before I unload the mat or anything, I'll just do this part and then it will be ready to start in a few minutes. So now it wants me to select the next part. So I'm going to select that. So I've already cut A and B. I'm now going to cut C. So I'm going to choose C, and that's the rectangles, and I'm going to say OK. It knows I want 4 and it's going to put them on the mat. So I'm just going to flip you back to my other camera so that I can take these white elements off this mat and load the next mat up. So I'm going to peel off the fabric, and I'm just going to gently remove all my squares. Now just try and be careful, because you can stretch them. This is frayed a little. This is because this is a very sticky mat. If you're worried about any fraying, you could spray your fabric with spray starch and iron it, which will make it a little bit stiffer before you put it onto your mat. But I've still got enough seam allowance to sew, so I think I'm going to be all right. There's my next one. There's my triangles. As I say, if you're worried about the fraying, this is fraying more than normal because this is a very sticky mat. So, if you are using the high-tack support sheet or you're using a brand new mat, you may want to just spray starch your fabric before you start. But I didn't want to do that. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to try and remove as much of the loose fibres as I can. And then I'm going to bring in a baby wipe and just rub over this mat, and that will pick up all these loose fibres for me. And I would get into the habit of wiping over your mat with a baby wipe in between each fabric piece that you cut, because if you saw last month's video, I forgot to do this, and when I was putting down one of my fabrics, although it appeared to be sticking, when it came to cut, it did move a little. So that picks up all the fibres. You don't have to worry about trying to scrape them or get your hands on the mat or anything like that. I'm going to let that sit for a few minutes and just let the baby wipe, the moisture from the baby wipe, dry. The fabric that I'm going to use for the next elements is this spotty fabric. So that's what I'm going to load onto this mat in a few minutes. Okay, so this should be dry enough now. So again, I'm going to bring in my next piece of fabric. I'm going to put it right side down on the mat. These fabrics have all been cut bigger than I need. I actually cut all my fabric right at the beginning of the quilt along, and I just put them all in like little plastic bags with which block they were relating to. So a lot of the fabrics were pressed initially, but because they've been folded up, they've got some crease or fold marks in them, but they should be okay. If you're worried, just re-iron your fabric before you start cutting, because the better you prepare your fabric, the better result you'll get. So let's go back to the machine. I'm going to load in this next mat. I'm going to take the blade out and put the pen back in. And then I'm going to do the same as I did before. So I'm going to do a background scan and say start. That's going to show my fabric on the mat. And again, it looks as though it's a little bit too near the top. So I'm going to say edit, select the 3 red boxes and the box on the right hand side that selects everything. Now I can just select one of them and drag it down so that it's away from the edge of the fabric. Now I can go OK, 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 select and draw. I'm going to press start, and that again is now going to draw me the sew lines. So again, I'm going to choose finish, then this time I'm going to say cut, going to take the pen out, put my blade back in, press start. So now that's all finished, I'm going to say select next part, and I've just got part D to do next because I've cut everything else. So I'm going to select part D. It shows me the bit in the middle that relates to the design. I only need one of this, it's telling me, so I need to say set, and then I'm going to unload this mat, and we're ready to do the last bit of cutting. So I'm going to peel away the fabric, and I've now got the 4 rectangular elements, and this fabric is a tighter weave fabric, so this one hasn't frayed like the white one did. So they're the next 4 sections to the block. I'm just going to bring in the baby white that I've just used and just find a clean bit of it, and again I'm just going to get up any loose fibres so that they don't get caught up in the blade, and just kind of reactivate this mat. And then when I've cut this last element, I will do exactly the same. I will wipe the mat over, let it dry, and then put the protective sheet back on it. So I'm just going to give that a few minutes to dry. It only takes a few seconds, actually, not minutes. I'm going to be using this piece of grey fabric for this one. Again, as I say, all my fabric's been cut bigger than I need, but that's just because I cut it all at the beginning and I wasn't sure how much I'd need. So I think I did the width of the fat quarters for the length, and then I just cut them all at kind of somewhere around about between 10 and 11 inches, something like that. So again, just going to smooth it out with my hands, working from top to bottom and then out from the middle. So I only have one last piece to cut for this. So let's go back to the machine, load the mat, take the blade out, put the pen back in. I'm going to do a background scan again because this piece of fabric doesn't cover the whole width of the mat. So I can see where my square is and I can see where my fabric is. I'm just going to drag it onto the fabric. I'm going to say OK, select and draw and start. So if you work your way through this methodically, you know, it is quite straightforward, and the ScanNCut's doing all the hard work for you. It's doing all the cutting and it's putting in your draw lines so that you know how to sew everything together, and that's going to make your finished result come together a lot better. So I'm going to take the pen out, put the blade in, go to finish, which takes us back so that we can now select cut and start. That's it. So now I can say finish, and I can hit the home button and say, yes, it's okay to delete all patterns, and I can unload this mat. So I'm going to peel away this piece of fabric. I've just put my spatula away, so I'll just lift the corner with my piercing tool. And again, this fabric hasn't pulled as much as my white fabric, just a tiny little bit there. But again, I'm not sure how well you'll see that, but I've got my drawn line on and I'm ready now to cut. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to bring in my baby wipe again, just find another clean little bit and just go over that element, that section of the mat where I've just cut that last element. And that's it. That's the mat all nice and clean and, you know, conditioned and ready to use next time. So I'll put this on one side, let this dry for a few seconds, and then I'll be able to put the plastic cover back on it and it's good to go next time. So now these are all the elements for the block. So this one, the square in the middle goes on point, and then these all go around it like so, if I'm remembering how to do it from last month. It's very similar, it's just got an extra, I've just used 3 colours. And then these go in here like so, and then the 4 blocks go in the corners. So I would do my little trick where I take a photograph of this on my phone so I know how it all goes together. And I'm going to sew this block together the exact same way as I did last month's block, which is I'm going to sew the triangles to this piece first so that then this becomes a row. So basically I will sew from top left across. So these will go right sides together and I'll sew straight down from edge to edge down that purple line, and that will open out. And then I will do the same on this side, right sides together. So right from, not sure how well you're going to see this, let me bring you down. So right from off the edge of the fabric down and off the other side down this purple line, and that will become a row. And then this will be the same, but the bit in the middle is sewn slightly differently. So what you do with this, you put your right sides together like so. And then with this one, you only sew from the drawn line point to the drawn line point. So you're not actually sewing down these like little dog ears. And that's to give you room to put your next one down. Okay, so if you're unsure, I'm going to show you again, but you can always go back and watch last month's video as well, because that went together exactly the same. So I'm going to sew all the right sides of the triangles to the right side of this center square, then they'll open out and then this becomes a row, and I'll do the same. I'll flip that over, sew from off the edge down the purple line to off the edge, and do the same on that side, do the same on my bottom row. Then I'll have 3 rows and then it's a case of putting the rows together. Okay, so I'm just going to flip over to my sewing machine and we'll be ready to start doing the first section. Okay, I just realised you've not seen any of that. So basically what I've done, I've got my triangles, my white triangles. I'm going to be sewing down this line, but I'm going to highlight each end just so that I can see it under the foot better. So this is the line I'm going to be sewing down, but I want to start here and stop here, okay? And so I can see that better, I'm just making that line easier to see with another fabric marker. And I've already done 2. I didn't realise you'd not been seeing what I'd been doing. So I've got 2 on already. I'm folding this little dog ear back where the stitching stops. I'm going to put this one in place, put it under the foot, put the foot down until I can see my needle is dropping over that line I've just sewn. And then I'm just going to follow the sew line and stitch all the way down and stop a 1/4 of an inch from the end. I've just got the last one to do, and I'm just folding the little dog ear out of the way so that it doesn't get caught up in the stitches, and I need to do that now top and bottom because I've got 3 of the half square triangles already on. So I'm just going to bring this last piece in and do the same. Okay, so if I open this up now, all these little, I just need to fold back the corners. All these little dog-eared corners are not sewn down, but they'll get caught up because this is going to go in the centre of the block like this, and they'll get caught up in the next seam. So this just needs a quick press now before I go any further. All this is right sides together, and I'm just starting on the edge and sewing from edge to edge on these. So that's the top row done. So I'm going to put that back, and then I'm going to bring in the elements for my middle row and put these together. So right sides together. Got some stray threads there, but they can get sorted out at the end. And again, just bring the next section in. And just follow the line that the ScanNCut drew for me. And that's row 2. Okay, so here we are. So it's now sewing the rows together. So this one's going to go on top, and I'm going to sew along and fold that back. And this one's going to go on the bottom, right sides together, sew along that line and fold it back. And then it'll be done, and it just needs pressing, and then it'll need trimming to 10 inches. Just going to bring in a couple of wonder clips, and I'm just going to clip the seams together. So I'm going to find the seam on the top piece and line it up with the seam underneath, and just put a clip in there just to hold it in place while I'm sewing, and then do the same on the other end. And if you line your seams up first and either pin or clip them, you've got more of a chance of it going together a bit nicer. So I'm going to flip it round, and I'm going to put this one in place while I'm here. So just going to give this a quick press just to help it line up a little bit better. So right sides together, put your seams together. Okay, so that's what we've got now. So now I'm going to sew along here, and then it's nearly done. Just going to remove my clips as I go. Just take my time going over the seams and just follow as best I can that line that the ScanNCut drew for me. Okay, so that's how that's looking. So I'm just going to flip it around and do the same on the opposite side. Okay, and there it is. So I'm just going to give it a very quick press and just pull out some of these stray threads from the fraying on the white bits of fabric, and then I'll show it you in a few minutes and I'll show you how to square it up. So here it is. It's actually turned out better than I thought. It looks pretty much perfect. All my seams are lining up. This one's off about a millimetre, but again, I'm not going to let it worry me. I'm just going to measure it on my mat. I just want to try and find the straightest edge first. So it literally is about 10.5 by a smidge under 10.5. So I'm going to trim off a tiny little bit first on here. I can see that this spotty piece is just slightly narrower than the white piece. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to assume that this is a straight seam here on the white section, and I'm going to put a line on my ruler, one of the solid black lines that I can see on that seam. So at least then I know my ruler should be straight. And I'm just going to trim off whatever is overhanging, which is barely nothing. If you have a look, that's it. But that's going to give me a nice straight edge now. So I can turn this around, bring it back to my ruler and put it down on the 0, 0 mark in the corner of my mat and have a look and see what the size is now. So it's measuring just over 10.25. So I want to bring my ruler in because I think these need to be about 2.5 inches. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to find a seam that's nice and straight on the horizontal, and I'm just going to trim away any slithers to get a nice straight edge, and then see what size I've got. So if I measure this now, this is 2 5/8, and that's about the same. So I can take an 1/8 off either side to get it to 10 inches. So if I use my ruler, I'm going to turn this round because I'm right-handed and I find it easier to work this way. I've got an 1/8 mark on my ruler. I'm going to line the 1/8 mark up with the edge of the block and cut. And then do the same on the opposite corner. So which one have I just done? I've just done that one, I think, haven't I? So that's exactly 2.5 inches now, this corner square, which I think that's what it needs to be. So I'm going to take an 1/8 off this side, and this should then make this 10 inches, and then I'll have to do the same on the opposite side. So I'm going to line the edge of the block up with the 1/8 mark on my ruler and trim. And this should now be exactly 10 inches, and it is. So now I'm going to turn it this way and see what we've got again. So again, I can afford to square this up a little. I'm going to take a slither off first. I'm going to line up one of my horizontal lines with a horizontal seam line and square up the edge and do the same on this side. And then once I know I've got a square edge, I can then see exactly what needs trimming off. So let's see what we've got now. So again, we've got, probably can get away with taking just about an 1/8 off either side again. to let me measure. So that one's slightly bigger and that one's slightly bigger. So I'm going to do it this way again. So I'm going to bring in my ruler, bring it to an 1/8 and trim. Turn it round and just double check. Yeah, so I can take an 1/8 off this side now. So this should be about 2.5 inches. Or is it that side? Have I not done that one? Hang on, it's this side I've not done. I know this is a bit confusing, but you'll work it out yourselves. You're basically just squaring up your ruler, and you don't want to take, if your block is, 1/2 inch too big, you don't just want to go and chop 1/4 inch off either side straight away. You want to try and get a nice straight edge before you start trimming. And obviously you want your blocks, especially in your corners, to be the same size. So that's why I'm, squaring up slightly on both sides first by literally just taking slithers away, like this. There's nothing virtually there. And then I see what I've got, make sure I know what size I need, because this is meant to be a 10-inch finish block. So these should be 2.5 inches, which gives you 5, and then this should be 5. So if I bring this back in now, this is 10 by 10. So that is block 4. If this is the first video that you've found, I'll just quickly show you the other 3 blocks. This was block 1, this was block 2, this was last month's block, block 3, and now this is today's block, block 4. So as you can see, they're all nicely squared up at 10 inches. So in the next video, it's going to be working out how you want to lay them out, getting your batting and doing some simple quilting. It's entirely up to you how you lay your blocks out. All my blocks have got white in the corner. I know that these 2 blocks are smaller white sections, but that doesn't unduly bother me. This still white. It's entirely up to you. You might want to put those 2 together. You might want to put these 2 together. I don't know yet. I'll see how I feel when I get the wadding and the batting and everything ready to do it. But that is the 4 blocks. So please give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you for the next part of the quilt along.